Truth is a mobile army of metaphors. This provocative statement by Friedrich Nietzsche invites us to question our deepest certainties and the way we seek to understand the world around us. In an era dominated by endless debates and incessant argumentation, perhaps it's time to ask ourselves, are we really advancing towards wisdom or merely spinning in circles of empty rhetoric? Nietzsche, one of the most influential and controversial philosophers in history, challenges us to reconsider the very nature of knowledge and truth. He urges us to question whether our contemporary obsession with debate and argumentation is truly a sign of intellectual strength or, paradoxically, a manifestation of deeply rooted weakness and insecurity. Consider for a moment, how many times have you found yourself embroiled in heated discussions, fiercely defending your point of view, only to end up exhausted and without having really changed anyone's opinion? This pattern of behavior, so common in our society, may be more revealing than we imagine. Nietzsche suggests that this constant need to justify our beliefs and opinions might actually be a defense mechanism, a desperate attempt to mask our own doubts and insecurities. True strength, according to the Nietzschean perspective, may lie precisely in the ability to not need to debate. Imagine the serenity and confidence of someone who is so secure in their convictions that they don't feel the need to convince others or seek external validation. This stance is not one of arrogance, but of deep intellectual and emotional self-sufficiency. However, it's crucial to recognize that this critique of excessive debate is not an invitation to ignorance or rejection of constructive dialogue. On the contrary, it's a call for a higher form of engagement with knowledge and with others. Nietzsche challenges us to transcend the mere exchange of arguments and seek a deeper, more intuitive understanding of reality. This perspective leads us to question the Socratic legacy that permeates Western thought. Socrates, with his emphasis on logical reasoning and constant questioning, left an indelible mark on our approach to knowledge. However, Nietzsche invites us to consider the limitations of this model. The Socratic tradition, by placing reason at the center of everything, can inadvertently lead us to a state of intellectual paralysis. How many times have we found ourselves trapped in an endless cycle of analysis and counter-analysis, unable to act or make decisions? This excess of rationalization can distance us from crucial aspects of human experience that cannot be easily explained or justified by pure logic. Nietzsche reminds us that not everything important in life can be subjected to the scrutiny of reason. There are truths we feel, intuitions that guide us, and instincts that protect us. By neglecting these aspects in favor of a purely rational approach, we risk becoming one-dimensional beings, disconnected from our own nature. This reflection leads us to an intriguing question. If constant debate and excessive argumentation are signs of weakness, where does true strength lie? The answer, according to Nietzsche, may lie in surprising directions, which we will explore further. For now, allow yourself to question, how many of your most deeply held beliefs are the result of genuine reflection, and how many are mere reflexes of endless debates? As we venture deeper into Nietzsche's thought, we are confronted with a perspective that fundamentally challenges our modern understanding of knowledge and decision-making. Nietzsche invites us to reconsider the vital role of instinct and intuition in our lives, aspects often neglected in a society that privileges rationality above all else. Reflect for a moment on the most important decisions you've ever made in your life. Were they the result of meticulous and rational analysis, or was there an element of intuition, a gut feeling that guided you? Nietzsche would argue that many of our best decisions come precisely from what we cannot fully explain through logic. Instinct, according to Nietzsche, is not a primitive relic to be overcome, but a vital source of wisdom and guidance. Our ancestral cultures, far from being less evolved, perhaps possessed a deeper connection to this instinctive wisdom. They relied on their instincts not for lack of rational capacity, but because they recognized the invaluable worth of this form of knowledge for survival and flourishing. Consider how, in situations of imminent danger, our body reacts even before our conscious mind processes the information. This bodily knowledge is a powerful example of what Nietzsche valued, a form of intelligence that transcends conscious thought and connects us directly with the reality around us. Intuition, in turn, can be seen as a refined form of instinct. It's that sudden and profound understanding we sometimes experience, a clarity that seems to come from nowhere, but often proves to be correct. Nietzsche encourages us to cultivate and trust this intuitive faculty, not as an alternative to reason, but as an essential complement to it. However, in our modern society, we are often trained to distrust our instincts and intuitions. We are taught to seek evidence, to justify every decision, to submit every impulse to the tribunal of reason. While this approach has its merit, Nietzsche warns us of the danger of completely stifling our instinctive nature. The philosopher argues that this suppression of instinct can lead to a form of existential weakness. When we become excessively dependent on reason and debate to validate every aspect of our lives, we lose connection with our own inner strength. We become hesitant beings, constantly seeking external approval, unable to act decisively without first constructing an elaborate edifice of justifications. Nietzsche challenges us to regain this confidence in our instincts and intuitions. This doesn't mean abandoning reason, but rather finding a more harmonious balance between our different faculties. It's an invitation to reconnect with an older and deeper form of wisdom, one that doesn't rely exclusively on logical arguments or endless debates. Imagine the unlocked potential of a life lived with this instinctive confidence, decisions made with clarity and conviction, actions carried out with purpose and vigor, an existence aligned not just with our thoughts, but with our entire being. This is the vision of strength that Nietzsche presents to us. However, it's crucial to understand that this is not a call for unreflective impulsivity. Nietzsche is not advocating for a total abandonment of reason, but for a deeper integration of all our faculties. The real challenge lies in learning to listen to and trust our instincts and intuitions, even when they seem to contradict what our rational mind tells us. This perspective leads us to a provocative question. To what extent are our lives governed by external rules and expectations, and how much space do we give for the genuine expression of our instincts and intuitions? The answer to this question may reveal much about our true strength or weakness. As we delve deeper into Nietzsche's thought, we encounter a radical and potentially transformative vision of the nature of strength and action. For Nietzsche, true strength does not reside in the ability to win debates or accumulate knowledge, but in the ability to act decisively without the constant need for justification. Consider for a moment, how many times have you postponed an important decision, trapped in an endless cycle of analysis and doubt? Nietzsche would argue that this hesitation, this fear of acting without having all the answers, is a manifestation of weakness, not prudence. The Nietzschean concept of the Übermensch, often translated as Superman or Overman, encapsulates this idea of inner strength and self-sufficiency. The Übermensch is not a superior being in the conventional physical or intellectual sense, but someone who has transcended the need for external validation and created their own values. Imagine the freedom and power that come from living according to your own principles, without the constant need to justify your actions to others or to yourself. This is the vision of strength that Nietzsche presents to us, a strength that emanates from within, not dependent on external approval or recognition. However, it's crucial to understand that this is not a call for unbridled egoism or total rejection of social norms. On the contrary, it's an invitation to a deeper and more authentic form of ethical engagement with the world. Nietzsche challenges us to create our own values, not out of whim or rebellion, but as a result of deep reflection and self-knowledge. This process of value creation is, in itself, a form of action. It's an act of life affirmation, a declaration that we are willing to take responsibility for our choices and their consequences. It's here that we find the true philosophical courage that Nietzsche so admired. But how can we apply this perspective in our everyday lives? Start by questioning the values and beliefs you've inherited. Ask yourself, are these really my convictions or just reflections of what I've been taught? Am I living according to my own principles or just following a pre-established script? This questioning can be uncomfortable, even frightening. After all, it's easier to follow established rules than to create our own. But it's precisely in this discomfort that the opportunity for growth and self-realization lies. Nietzsche encourages us to embrace this challenge, to have the courage to question everything, including our own most deeply held beliefs. He invites us to live experimentally, to test different perspectives and ways of being, always with a critical eye and a willingness to change. This approach to life requires a form of strength that goes beyond mere assertiveness or dominance. It's a strength that manifests in the ability to remain true to oneself in the face of adversity, to act according to one's convictions, even when it means going against the current. Consider the great innovators and visionaries of history. They didn't achieve their feats through endless debates or seeking universal consensus. They acted based on their convictions, often facing ridicule and opposition. It's this willingness to act, this confidence in their inner vision, that Nietzsche sees as the mark of true strength. However, it's important to note that this perspective is not a license for recklessness or disregard for others. Strength, in Nietzsche's view, comes with deep responsibility. In creating our own values, we also assume responsibility for the consequences of our actions. This vision leads us to a provocative question. Are we really living according to our own values, or just blindly following the values imposed by society? The answer to this question may reveal much about our true strength or weakness. As we deepen our exploration of Nietzsche's thought, we are confronted with his incisive critique of modern morality and philosophy. This challenging perspective invites us to fundamentally reconsider the ethical and intellectual structures that shape our society. Nietzsche argues that philosophy and morality, far from being liberating tools, often become burdens that prevent us from living authentically. They overwhelm us with doubts, guilt, and insecurity, making us constantly question our natural instincts and vital impulses. Reflect for a moment. How many times have you felt paralyzed by ethical dilemmas, unable to act due to the weight of moral considerations? Nietzsche suggests that this paralysis is not a sign of ethical sophistication, but of a weakening of our natural vitality. Conventional morality, according to Nietzsche, often serves as a control mechanism, a way to domesticate the human spirit. It teaches us to distrust our desires, to repress our impulses, to constantly seek external approval. This process, he argues, distances us from our true nature and turns us into diminished beings, always in doubt, always seeking justification. Consider the numerous ethical dilemmas we face in modern life. We are constantly navigating a minefield of moral choices, from consumer decisions to relationship and career issues. Each choice seems laden with ethical implications, each action potentially subject to moral judgment. Nietzsche challenges us to question whether this hypermoralization of life really makes us better or just more insecure and guilty. He suggests that, instead of elevating us, this obsession with morality often traps us in an endless cycle of self-criticism and doubt. But what about philosophy? Shouldn't it liberate us from these shackles? Nietzsche argues that all too often, modern philosophy becomes complicit in this process of weakening. Instead of encouraging us to think for ourselves and create our own values, it often reduces itself to an exercise in justifying existing norms or an endless debate about abstractions with no practical relevance. The philosopher invites us to consider a radical perspective. What if the incessant search for ethical and philosophical justification is in itself a symptom of weakness? What if true strength lies in the ability to live beyond these constructs, trusting our instincts and creating our own values? This critique of conventional morality and philosophy is not an invitation to nihilism or amorality. On the contrary, it's a call for a more authentic and vital form of ethical engagement with the world. Nietzsche challenges us to create an ethic based on life affirmation, not on the denial of our natural impulses. Imagine an existence where your actions flow from a deep inner conviction, not from fear of punishment or desire for reward. A life where you're not constantly measuring yourself against external standards, but creating your own standards of excellence and virtue. This vision leads us to a provocative question. Are we living according to our authentic instincts and values, or are we merely following learned rules and social expectations? The answer to this question may reveal much about our true strength or weakness. Nietzsche encourages us to critically examine the sources of our moral beliefs. Where do our values come from? Are they really ours, or are they just reflections of inherited traditions and social conventions? This process of questioning can be uncomfortable, even painful, but it's essential for growth and self-realization. By challenging established moral and philosophical structures, Nietzsche is not advocating for chaos or the absence of ethics. He's inviting us to a higher form of ethical responsibility, one where we take full responsibility for our values and actions without hiding behind prefabricated moral systems. As we enter the deeper layers of Nietzsche's thought, we are confronted with his provocative perspective on the nature of justice and power. This view fundamentally challenges our conventional notions and invites us to reconsider the structures that shape our society. Nietzsche proposes a radical idea. What if justice, far from being a universal and impartial ideal, is actually a construction of the powerful to maintain control? This perspective forces us to question the very foundations of our legal and ethical systems. Consider for a moment, who really defines what is just in our society? The laws and norms that govern our lives, are they truly impartial, or do they reflect the interests of those in power? Nietzsche challenges us to look beyond the facade of impartiality and examine the underlying power dynamics. In practice, Nietzsche argues, justice is often dictated by those who hold power. Laws, social norms, even our notions of right and wrong, are shaped by the interests of dominant groups. This is not necessarily a malevolent conspiracy, but rather a natural reflection of how power operates in society. This perspective leads us to question the idea of universal justice. Nietzsche suggests that different groups and cultures have different conceptions of justice, each reflecting their own needs and values. The search for a single universal definition of justice may therefore be not only futile, but potentially oppressive. But what does this mean for us as individuals and for society as a whole? Nietzsche is not advocating for the total abandonment of the idea of justice, but invites us to a more sophisticated and nuanced understanding of how it functions in the real world. Imagine a society where we openly recognize the power dynamics behind our notions of justice, where, instead of hiding behind abstract ideals, we honestly face the realities of power and influence. This awareness could lead us to a more authentic and effective engagement with issues of social justice. Nietzsche challenges us to go beyond passive acceptance of existing justice structures. He encourages us to question, challenge, and when necessary, create new ways of understanding and implementing justice that are more aligned with the reality of our lived experiences. This perspective on justice and power has profound implications for how we understand ethics and morality. If our notions of right and wrong are largely products of power dynamics, how can we navigate the ethical world? Nietzsche suggests that the answer lies in developing our own moral compass based on a deep understanding of our own experiences and values. Consider the implications of this view for contemporary issues of social justice. How does it make us rethink movements for equality and rights? Perhaps Nietzsche suggests the real struggle is not for abstract and universal justice, but for the power to define and implement our own vision of justice. This perspective leads us to a provocative question. Are we really seeking justice, or are we simply competing for the power to define what is just? The answer to this question may reveal much about our motivations and aspirations, both individual and collective. Nietzsche invites us to a more honest and direct form of engagement with issues of justice and power. Instead of hiding behind abstract ideals, he encourages us to recognize and confront the realities of power in our lives and in our society. This approach is not an invitation to cynicism or despair. On the contrary, it's a call for a more mature and effective way of dealing with the complexities of the real world. By recognizing the power dynamics behind our notions of justice, we can engage in a more strategic and impactful way in the pursuit of meaningful change. As we reach the end of our exploration of Nietzsche's thought, we are left with a series of provocative questions and potentially transformative insights. The journey through the ideas of this iconoclastic philosopher leads us to fundamentally reconsider our notions of debate, strength, morality, justice, and power. Nietzsche challenges us to question the very nature of knowledge and truth. He invites us to consider whether our contemporary obsession with debate and argumentation is really a sign of intellectual strength or, paradoxically, a manifestation of weakness and insecurity. This perspective leads us to reflect on how we interact with ideas and with each other in our quest for understanding. Consider for a moment, How often do we engage in debates not to seek truth, but to reaffirm our existing beliefs? Nietzsche suggests that true strength may lie in the ability to not constantly need to justify our positions, to act with conviction, based on a deep understanding of our own experiences and values. This view invites us to reconsider the role of instinct and intuition in our lives. In a society that often privileges reason above all else, Nietzsche reminds us of the power and wisdom of our non-rational faculties. He encourages us to trust more in our instincts, to value that knowledge we feel viscerally, even when we cannot articulate it logically. But perhaps the most challenging aspect of Nietzsche's thought is his critique of conventional morality and established philosophical structures. He invites us to question whether our notions of right and wrong are really our own, or if they are merely reflections of inherited traditions and social conventions. This questioning can be uncomfortable, even disturbing, but it is essential for personal growth and authenticity. Nietzsche challenges us to go beyond good and evil, not in the sense of abandoning all ethics, but of creating our own values based on a deep affirmation of life. He encourages us to live experimentally, to test different perspectives and ways of being, always with a critical eye and a willingness to change. This approach to life requires a form of strength that goes beyond mere assertiveness or dominance. It's a strength that manifests in the ability to remain true to oneself in the face of adversity, to act according to one's convictions even when it means going against the current. At the same time, Nietzsche warns us of the dangers of a morality that becomes a burden, that overwhelms us with constant guilt and doubt. He invites us to consider an existence beyond good and evil, where our actions flow from a deep inner conviction, not from fear of punishment or desire for reward. Finally, Nietzsche's perspective on justice and power challenges us to look beyond the facades of impartiality and examine the underlying dynamics that shape our societies. This view is not an invitation to cynicism, but to a more mature and effective way of engaging with the complexities of the real world. As we reflect on these ideas, it's crucial to remember that Nietzsche doesn't offer us definitive answers, but rather an invitation to question, explore, and create. His ideas are not absolute truths to be blindly accepted, but tools to stimulate our own critical thinking and personal growth. Perhaps, just perhaps, the true value of Nietzsche's thought lies not in the specific conclusions he reaches, but in the way he challenges us to think for ourselves, to question our most basic assumptions, and to live more authentically and courageously. As we conclude, we are left with a final question. How can we incorporate these insights into our own lives? How can we cultivate the inner strength to live beyond constant debate, to trust our instincts, to create our own values, and to honestly face the realities of power in our society? The answer, as Nietzsche would suggest, cannot be provided by any philosopher or system of thought. It must be discovered by each of us in our own journey of self-exploration and self-discovery. The invitation is made. The journey is yours.